What's up, Panthers Nation? We're back today with another video. Keep pounding. So, in today's video, we are going to be talking about the Carolina Panthers injuries. So, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit that bell so you don't miss any new content. Select all, and leave a comment down below if you feel so inclined. Let's get into it. All right. So I found a website that deals specifically with what injuries we had. Um, it lists all the players, whether they were probable, questionable, doubtful, out, injury reserve, or physically unable to perform. Now, um, you go back to, we're going to start from the 2013 season. And I want to do that year specifically because that's when Dave Gettleman took over um, as general manager. Ron Rivera was the head coach. We went 12-4 that year. Shula was our offense coordinator. Sean McDermott our defense coordinator. So, you know, and as you scroll through these charts every year, notice what players are on this list. Notice how long they're on the list, and it's color coded for you. The red is going to be injury reserve, physically unable to perform. And then there's out. And then the orange is doubtful, yellow is questionable, green is probable. And as you go through this chart, you'll notice how many people are on IR, how many people are out, and physically unable to perform. Now, here's the interesting part. When you start looking at which players specifically were out, and they come back, they play a game, they become questionable, or they go out again, or they become doubtful. And it's just a repeating pattern. And here's a pretty good example. Kenjon Barner in 2013. First game he was out. Doubtful, played a full game, doubtful, probable, and then he played the rest of the season. Here's Chase Blackburn, probable, questionable, and then out for 2 games. Questionable, plays for 2 games, and then questionable again. See, it's a repeating pattern, and you'll notice it when you look through these charts. And I wasn't able to prove this theory until now, but I believe that Ron Rivera was playing these players before they were fully able to come back onto the field and were fully healthy. And you'll notice in 2013, and this is before Dave really took over and didn't let him get away with this anymore for the next 3 years until he was fired. Your probable percentage was 90%. Questionable was 70%. Doubtful was 7.69. And those are big totals, man. 52 times probable reported was 20 times reported questionable, 13 doubtful, 40 out. 236 injury reserve. I mean, these are big numbers. And this is before Gettleman took over. And you're looking at the next season, which is 2014. We went 7-8, 7-8-1 actually. We had the tie. and we ended up losing the divisional round to the Seahawks. Shula was the offense coordinator, McDermott the defense coordinator again, and of course Ron Rivera the head coach. Um, but as you look at this chart, you'll notice how many people are actually not hurt on this chart anymore. You'll notice how much clearer it is. You'll see a bunch of green on this chart. Uh, and it wasn't major players, you know. Um, so I'm looking at Nate Chandler that was on the IR for about 5 or 6 weeks, and then Greg Hardy that was out for at least 14 games. But other than that, you're not really seeing anybody that's of major significance on here other than Stewart, maybe Tolbert, Fozzie, D'Angelo Williams. Yeah, it was mostly on the offensive side. Josh Norman had a couple of games out, but Cam Newton was probable, played a ton of games, out probable. And you'll see it on these charts. It's not. It won't be immediately obvious to you until you start flipping through the years. What you're looking at. But in this particular year, you're looking at Gary Williams, who was an offensive lineman, I believe. Out for one game, probable, doubtful, and then cleared for the rest of the year. But you're looking at wait, who was suspended? I'm seeing that on the list now. I'm a little surprised at that. Who was it? Trying to see. I don't. Oh, DC Jefferson. Okay. I see that now. That was weird. Okay. But that's on the chart for that year. But 58 probable, 93% probable. You're looking at 84% questionable. 19 times reported. Doubtful, you got 13 reported, 77 out, 108 injury reserve, and 9 physically unable to perform. Notice the difference as you go year to year. And then we're going to hit the Super Bowl year, which you won't see anybody really majorly on this list for a significant amount of time, except for Nate Chandler. Kelvin Benjamin was out the entire year. But even the main players were not on this list for a significant amount of time. So, even Darrell Williams, who was out for 5 games and then became probable against the Colts, was still able to play the rest of the games of that season. So you think, okay, let's take a look at the numbers now. You got 97% probable, 54% questionable, 12 times reported doubtful, 32 out. Notice how big of a difference that is compared to the last 2 seasons that I've been doing this video on. That you're looking at here. And again, that's Mike Shula, offense coordinator, Sean McDermott, defensive coordinator, Dave Gettleman, general manager, and Ron Rivera, head coach, 15-1 that year. And we all know what happened in 2015, so there's no need to really get into it. Um, so here's 2016. And you'll notice how much red is on this list, is on this chart in 2016. You've got Bird IR, Raheem Cox IR, Ryan Delaire IR. You got Dean Marlowe has been hurt like for a good number of years, so that's not a surprise. Kevin Norwood IR for the entire season. Jordan Rigsby IR for the entire season. Jonathan Stewart questionable against San Francisco, and then out for 3 games, questionable again against the Saints. You got Shaq Thompson out for a game, questionable the next one. You got Darrell Williams out for 3 games. Teddy Williams out for like half the year. Daryl Worley questionable. That's not a good looking chart. You got Bradbury out for 2 games and questionable. Vernon Butler out for like 5 games and then questionable. And as this progresses, this is after Dave Gettleman got fired. This chart just gets uglier and uglier. Up until 2019. Read you off the numbers here. 81% questionable. You still got only 28 reported people out. Or players reported out 28 times. But still, technically, Dave Gettleman was still GM in 2016, but they fired him that year. And we went 6-10. So you'll notice the decline right after that point. We still had Shula, we still had McDermott. So then we go 11-5 in 2017. This is when Steve Wilkes took over at defense coordinator. And you'll notice a huge chunk of people on the IR during this year. Corn Elder, Gradkowski, Deshaun Hall, Charles Johnson for the entire year. Cole Luke, Dean Marlowe out for the entire year. Greg Olson was out for a good chunk of the year. Curtis Samuel, Chris Scott, Scott Simonson, and Teddy Williams. Daryl Worley was out for 1 game as well. It's not a good looking chart at all. Ryan Khalil out for a good chunk as well. But again, you start seeing that pattern again of where Ron plays these players before they're ready to come back onto the field. And now that Gettleman is not letting him get away with that, at this particular point, now Norv Turner becomes the offensive coordinator. Eric Washington is the defensive coordinator in 2018. Tepper took over the team that year. Marty Herney back at general manager again. And you'll see Ron continue to do this. Here's Ross Cockrell again for the entire year. Elijah Hood for the entire year. Matt Khalil out for the entire year. Parms. Fred Ross. Fozzie Whitaker out for the entire year. Daryl Williams questionable, and then he goes out for the entire year. But you'll see these chunks of spaces in here where these players, they try to play him again. Like Greg Olson, they played him. He was questionable starting out that year. Out for 3 games, questionable again. Played for a good 6 games, and then back on the IR again. It it's a repeating pattern. And you're looking at 82% questionable, 33% doubtful. And players reported out 25 times that year. And now we're about to catch up with 2019. This is both the Turners, an offense coordinator, Eric Washington, a defensive coordinator. Technically, Rod started out the year, and then Perry finished up with the last 4. And Marty Herney, general manager, Tapper, owns the team. Here's where the chart gets a little bit complicated, because you're looking at a bunch of IRs all across the board. Again, major players that I should point out are Dennis Daly, questionable against Tampa Bay, doubtful against Atlanta, questionable again against the Saints. Look for that. And here's an excellent example of what I'm talking about. Dante Jackson. He was questionable against Houston, was out against Jacksonville with a groin injury, questionable again against Tampa Bay the next week. This is what Ron is doing with this team. That's why. That's one of the reasons I was so frustrated with him, and I was not comfortable with him as head coach anymore of this team. He was going off the rails compared to what he used to be, and this is like one of like half a dozen reasons I was not happy with him. But I was not able to prove it until I started looking at these charts, these injury reports and stuff. But in last year, you're looking at 70% questionable, 3 reported doubtful, 36 reported out, 153 reported injured reserve. Yikes. Notice that injured reserve just keeps going up every year. And it's key players, it's players that we need on the field. That's not good. And I'm not thrilled about where we're going if we had continued that pattern. So I'm really thankful that we don't have Ron here anymore. I wish him all the luck in Washington, D.C. I hope he figures things out. But that was not a good pattern for us. Not at all. Gettleman didn't let him get away with that during 13 through 15. But if you'll notice, like before 2013, that pattern was still going very, very strong. And, all the way from when he got hired for that first season and started doing it then, up until 2013, it looked like a mirror image of what we're looking at now for those last 4 years after the Super Bowl appearance. So, it's. I didn't want to have to put this video out, folks. I didn't want to. I didn't want to tarnish Ron's name. But after getting the proof that I needed, you know, I felt like this was information that people needed to see and needed to know about. So hopefully that was very informative to you. Um, Maybe you noticed this, maybe you didn't, but it's when you look around the league and you look at the coaches that are trying to keep their jobs, you'll notice at least 85% of those coaches are doing this for a good number of years. Not just a few, you know. They've been doing it since they get hired. And it's a bad habit to get into if you're a head coach. And I'm not trying to throw shade at any coaches. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. I'm just pointing out the what's obvious, and what's out there as information that people need to know about. But this is important because when you're looking at head coaching jobs, you're looking at how many good head coaches are still out there. This plays into that factor as well. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And as always, thank you for all the new subscribers and all the people that are showing love for the channel. We appreciate it during this time, me and my partners. So, thank you so much. And we hope you guys stay safe and stay happy through these challenging times. Alright guys, hit that like button, hit that sub button, select all, and I'll see you later. Keep pounding.